William Thompson gazed at the city of Chicago through the massive windows of his penthouse office in one of the most luxurious buildings on Park Avenue. At 35, he owned one of the largest tech companies in the country, with an estimated net worth in the billions. Yet something deeply troubled him on that autumn morning. The businessman adjusted his pure silk Italian tie and ran his hand through his perfectly trimmed brown hair. His reflection in the mirrored glass showed a sophisticated man with striking features and piercing green eyes, but it also revealed a restlessness that even his financial empire couldn't conceal. "Mr. Thompson," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The meeting with the investors is scheduled for 2 p.m., and your fiancée, Emily Vanderbilt, has called 3 times this morning." William sighed deeply. Emily, one of the most sought-after fashion designers in the country, was yet another element in his life that, while perfect on paper, didn't fill the inexplicable void consuming him. Their relationship was like a magazine ad, beautiful to look at but lacking real substance. "Tell Emily I'll call her later," he replied curtly, walking over to his Italian marble desk. Seated in his exclusive ergonomic chair, William began reviewing some documents when his attention was caught by a notification on his phone. It was a message from his grandmother, Grandma Eleanor, the only person who truly knew him beyond appearances. "My dear, don't forget that today is the day for your monthly donation to St. Anthony's Orphanage. I know you usually just transfer the money, but have you ever thought about visiting the place? Sometimes what we're searching for is found where we least expect it." Grandma Eleanor's words had the power to pierce through his defenses. For years he had made substantial donations to various institutions, but he had never personally involved himself with any of them. It was easier that way, keeping his distance as he did with everything and everyone in his life. That morning, however, something felt different. The void seemed larger, more present, as if it were demanding attention. William picked up the phone and called his assistant. "Cancel all my afternoon appointments. I'm going to visit St. Anthony's Orphanage." The decision was impulsive, something rare for a man who meticulously calculated every step of his life. As his driver prepared the car, William swapped his tie for a more casual sweater, trying to appear less intimidating. During the journey, he observed the bustling streets of the capital with a different gaze. People hurried by, each carrying their own stories, their own voids. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to question his choices, his priorities. The car stopped in front of a simple yet well-maintained building in the Brooklyn neighborhood. A discreet sign identified St. Anthony's Orphanage, a 3-story structure painted in soft shades of blue and white. The place exuded a welcoming atmosphere, completely different from the cold, calculated environments he was accustomed to. Before getting out of the car, William checked his reflection in the rearview mirror once more. It wasn't vanity, it was habit. Years of important negotiations had taught him that first impressions were crucial. But today wasn't a day for business. It was something different, something he didn't fully understand yet. With steady steps, he crossed the small garden leading to the main entrance. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the halls, creating a symphony that contrasted sharply with the tomb-like silence of his office. A middle-aged woman with a gentle smile greeted him at the reception. "Welcome to St. Anthony's Orphanage. How may I help you?" William hesitated for a moment, his carefully chosen words caught in his throat. There, in that simple yet vibrant environment, his rehearsed responses felt inadequate. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to be authentic. I'm William Thompson. I make monthly donations to the institution, and today I decided to see your work in person." The receptionist smiled even more warmly. "Ah yes, Mr. Thompson. Please wait a moment. I'll call our coordinator, Mrs. Elizabeth Johnson. She will be very happy to meet you." While he waited, William observed the walls decorated with children's drawings. Each colorful stroke told a story, expressed a dream, a hope. It was a world completely different from his, where the value of things wasn't measured in figures but in smiles. The sound of firm footsteps echoed down the hallway, and William found himself face to face with a woman around 40 years old, her dark hair tied in a simple bun and her determined brown eyes. Elizabeth Johnson exuded a natural aura of authority. mixed with a genuine kindness rarely found in the social circles he frequented. "Mr. Thompson, what a pleasant surprise." She extended her hand in a firm handshake. "Your donations have been crucial to our work. Would you like to tour our facilities?" William nodded, following Elizabeth through the orphanage's corridors. She passionately explained each project, each achievement, each dream fulfilled. She wasn't just a coordinator, she was a guardian of hopes. "This is our library," she explained, opening a door to reveal a cozy space filled with shelves of books and small, colorful tables. "The children love it." Her voice was interrupted by the sound of books falling. In the corner of the room, two boys around 6 years old were trying to reach a book on the highest shelf. William froze. Time seemed to stop. His heart raced, in a way he had never experienced before. The boys turned simultaneously, and William felt as if he were looking into a mirror of his past. The same green eyes, the same facial features, even the way they furrowed their brows in confusion was identical to his. They were twins, and they were inexplicably similar to him. "Michael! Gabriel!" Elizabeth called, her voice betraying a slight tension. "What did we agree about taking books from the high shelves?" The boys approached, heads down, but their curious eyes couldn't leave William's face. "Sorry, Aunt Bea," they said in unison, but soon Michael, the more outgoing of the two, couldn't contain his curiosity. "Aunt Bea, why does he look like us?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Elizabeth took a deep breath, her usually serene expression showing a hidden concern. William remained still, unable to fully process what was before his eyes. "Boys, why don't you go play in the yard for now? We'll talk about the books later, okay?" Elizabeth suggested gently. The twins hesitated for a moment but obeyed, not without casting curious glances at William. As soon as they were alone, William leaned on one of the children's tables, his legs suddenly weak. This is impossible," he murmured, more to himself than to Elizabeth. Elizabeth closed the library door and gestured to a chair for William. Her face took on a serious, professional expression. "Mr. Thompson, there are things we need to discuss. Michael and Gabriel arrived at the orphanage 2 years ago, when they were only 4 years old. They were conceived through artificial insemination, and their biological mother was unable to raise them." William felt the world spin. A distant memory began to surface in his mind, like a blurry film gradually coming into focus. 12 years ago, when he was still a college student, struggling to keep his fledgling company afloat, he had made a decision that seemed insignificant at the time. I was a donor at a fertility clinic," his voice trembled. "It was 2013. I needed money to keep my startup running. It was just once." Elizabeth nodded slowly, her eyes showing understanding. "The boys' records indicate they were conceived with genetic material from an anonymous donor during that time. The physical resemblance is undeniable." William stood up abruptly, walking to the window. In the courtyard below, he could see Michael and Gabriel playing with other children. He noticed how Gabriel, seemingly more shy, followed his more extroverted brother on their adventures. He observed their gestures, their expressions, every little detail that was like a mirror of his own childhood. They're amazing," he whispered, his voice choked with emotions he couldn't name. "What are they like? I mean, their personalities?" A gentle smile lit up Elizabeth's face. "Michael is our little leader, always full of ideas and plans. Gabriel is more reserved, observant, but equally brilliant. The two are extremely close and have a special talent for math and technology." William couldn't help but smile. He had been like that in his childhood too, fascinated by numbers and computers, always dreaming of impossible inventions. "And their mother?" Elizabeth's expression grew more serious. "She was a young scientist, very dedicated to her research. Unfortunately, she faced financial and emotional difficulties after the boys were born. She made the hardest decision a mother could make, believing they would have more opportunities." Here, a heavy silence filled the library. William felt his perfectly organized world crumbling, but for the first time in years, the emptiness in his chest seemed less profound. There, in that simple orphanage library, his life had completely changed. In the weeks that followed, William completely reorganized his schedule. The endless meetings were delegated, social events cancelled, and afternoons were now dedicated to the orphanage. To his team's astonishment, the always methodical businessman now left the office in the middle of the day, trading financial reports for children's stories and spreadsheets for colorful drawings. On one of those afternoons, William watched Michael and Gabriel assembling a complex puzzle. His constant presence had become natural for the children, who gradually let their guard down. Gabriel, the more introspective one, looked up from the game. "Do you like putting together puzzles too?" he asked timidly. William smiled, sitting on the floor with the children. "When I was your age, I spent hours putting together puzzles. My grandma used to say that's why I was so good with numbers and computers." Michael, always more direct, dropped the piece he was holding and stared at William. "Is it true that you have a computer company? Aunt Elizabeth said you make games." "Actually, my company develops security systems for computers," William explained, surprising himself with how easily he translated complex concepts into child-friendly language. "It's like I create magical shields to protect important information." The twins' eyes sparkled with fascination. Gabriel, usually reserved, moved closer. "I want to work with computers when I grow up," he confessed. "Michael wants to be an astronaut, but I prefer creating things." The conversation was interrupted by Elizabeth, who entered the room carrying art supplies. Her smile upon seeing their interaction warmed William's heart. Over the past few days, he had discovered in her not only a dedicated professional, but an extraordinary woman whose strength and compassion intrigued him more and more. "Time for art class, kids," she announced. "William, would you like to stay and join us?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed insistently. It was Emily, his fiancée, once again ignored in recent days. William sighed, torn between two worlds that seemed increasingly incompatible. "I need to take this, I'm sorry," he said, standing up. In the hallway, away from the children's ears, he answered the call. "Where are you, William?" Emily's voice sounded irritated. "I cancelled an important rehearsal so we could have lunch. Together today, remember?" "Emily, I'm sorry, No, enough excuses," she interrupted. "For weeks you've been distant, cancelling our plans. What's going on? Is there another woman?" William looked through the glass door at the children starting their art activities. Michael already had paint in his hair, while Gabriel was drawing intently. Elizabeth moved among the children, offering guidance and encouraging smiles. "It's nothing like that, Emily. I'm at St. Anthony's Orphanage. I've been involved in a social project here and..." "A social project?" Emily's laugh sounded forced. "Since when do you care about charity beyond donations to get your name in the society columns? William, you're different, and it's scaring." "Me? Our wedding is in 6 months." Emily's words weighed heavily on him. The wedding, like so many other things in his life, had been more about meeting social expectations than genuine feelings. Now, for the first time, he was starting to question those choices. "We need to talk in person," he finally said. "Can we have dinner tonight?" "Finally," Emily exclaimed. "I booked a table at the Ritz-Carlton at 8 p.m. Don't be late." Ending the call, William returned to the activity room. Michael immediately ran up to him, proudly showing off a colorful drawing. "Look, Uncle William, I drew our spaceship. I'm the astronaut. Gabriel is the engineer who built the ship. And you," he pointed to a tall figure in a suit, "you're our hero who protects the ship with your magic shield." William felt his eyes well up. The title of hero carried far more weight than any business award he had ever received. Gabriel approached too, shyly holding out his own drawing, a detailed portrait of the three of them, surprisingly well done for a 6-year-old. "That's Gus," Gabriel explained, almost whispering. Do you think we can be friends?" Elizabeth watched the scene with a mix of emotion and concern. She knew the system all too well not to fear the bonds forming there. William, on the other hand, felt his heart torn between the world of appearances he had built and the simple, genuine reality he was discovering at the orphanage. "We're already friends," he replied, carefully storing the drawings in his document folder. Those papers, filled with ink and love, were worth more than all the million-dollar contracts he had ever signed. The Ritz-Carlton sparkled like a jewel in the Chicago night. William adjusted his tie as he handed the car keys to the valet. Acutely, Aware of the contrast between this luxurious setting and the warm simplicity of the orphanage he had left just hours earlier. The twins' drawings were still in his folder, a tangible reminder of the transformation his life was undergoing. Emily was already waiting at the table, stunning in a red dress from her own collection. Her long blonde hair was impeccably styled, and her surgically precise makeup sent a clear message. She was dressed for battle. "Finally decided to show up," she remarked, not bothering to stand to greet him. "I thought you'd forgotten how to get here." William sat down, signaling to the approaching sommelier to wait a moment. "Emily, we need to have a serious talk." "Yes, we do," she cut in, her blue eyes flashing. "But first, I have something to tell you, something that will change everything." There was something in her tone that put him on edge. Years of negotiations had taught him to recognize when someone was about to make a decisive move. The sommelier discreetly stepped away, sensing the tension in the air. "William, I'm pregnant," Emily announced, a triumphant smile on her lips. "And it's twins." Time seemed to freeze. William felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. The word twins echoed in his mind, blending with the images of Michael and Gabriel. How are you sure they're twins?" he managed to ask, his voice steadier than he expected. "I had the tests done last week," she replied, stirring her glass of ice water. "I wanted to be sure before telling you. Isn't it wonderful? Now you'll have to stop this obsession with that orphanage and focus on our family." Something about the way she said, "our family," sounded artificial, calculated. William took a deep breath, years of business intuition alerting him to inconsistencies. "Why didn't you tell me about the tests earlier?" "I wanted it to be a surprise," she answered quickly. "Besides, you've been so busy with your new social project that we barely have time to talk." At that moment, William's phone vibrated. It was a message from his grandmother. "Dear, we need to talk about something important. I stopped by your apartment earlier and found some old medical documents. Call me when you can." "Emily," William began, his tone shifting subtly. "Exactly how long have you been pregnant?" "Almost 2 months," she replied without hesitation. "Why?" William felt a growing certainty that something was wrong. "And why did you choose today to tell me? Just when I started getting involved with the orphanage?" "What kind of question is that?" Emily's tone turned defensive. "I'm trying to save our relationship. Do you have any idea what people are saying? The great businessman William Thompson skipping important events to play charity? I'm not playing charity." His voice came out louder than he intended, drawing glances from nearby tables. Lowering his tone, he continued, "For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that truly matters." "Something that truly matters?" Emily laughed, without humor. "And what about our marriage? Our life together? The plans we made?" William looked deeply into her eyes, searching for something that perhaps had never been there. "What plans, Emily? Your plans or ours? When was the last time we actually talked about what we want?" His phone vibrated again. This time it was a call from Grandma Eleanor. Something in William's gut made him answer, despite Emily's furious glare. "Grandma?" "Yes, I'm at the Ritz-Carlton with Emily." "What? No, that's not possible. Are you sure?" Emily watched with growing apprehension as the color drained from William's face. When he hung up the phone, his green eyes were different, harder. "Emily," his voice was controlled but icy. "My grandmother just reminded me of something I had blocked from my memory. 8 years ago, after surgery, I had a vasectomy. It's documented. It's impossible for you to be pregnant with my child, let alone twins." The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's mask began to crack, her perfectly made-up face contorting into an expression of panic. I can explain," she stammered, her composure crumbling. "I just wanted—" "You wanted to manipulate me," William finished, a surreal calm washing over him. "Use a fake pregnancy to pull me away from the orphanage, from the children." "You've changed," Amanda exploded, tears threatening to ruin her makeup. "Ever. Since you started going to that place, you're not the same. Where's the ambitious man I met? The man who cared about status, about appearances? He finally grew up," William replied, standing up, "and realized there's so much more to life than status and appearances." The news of William Thompson's broken engagement with Emily Vanderbilt dominated the society columns for weeks, but the businessman barely noticed. His life now revolved around a completely different axis, centered on a small blue and white building in Brooklyn. On a particularly pleasant spring afternoon, William watched Elizabeth organizing an activity in the orphanage garden. She had gathered the children to plant a small vegetable patch, and her eyes sparkled as she explained the process of seed growth. "Look," she said, crouching beside the children, "each little seed has enormous potential inside it. With care, love, and patience, it will grow and turn into something wonderful." William couldn't help but notice how perfectly those words reflected the work she was doing there. Each child was like one of those seeds, waiting for the opportunity to bloom. "Uncle William," Michael called, running toward him with dirt-covered hands. "Come help us. Gabriel and I are planting tomatoes." Without hesitation, William took off his jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves. Elizabeth watched with a subtle smile as the businessman knelt on the ground, helping the boys prepare the garden beds. "You have to dig a hole just the right size," Gabriel explained, surprisingly technical for his age. "Not too deep, not too shallow. Just like when you program a computer, it has to be precise." "Have you been teaching them programming?" Elizabeth asked, approaching the group. William blushed slightly. "Just the basics. They have an impressive knack for understanding logic and sequences." "Like you," she replied, her eyes meeting his for a moment longer than necessary. "They can't stop talking about the computer classes you've been giving on weekends." Their connection was interrupted by a small commotion. One of the younger children had tripped, knocking over a pot of seedlings. Before Elizabeth could react, William was already there, comforting the girl and helping to replant the fallen seedlings. "Don't worry," he said gently. "Sometimes things don't go as planned, but that doesn't mean they can't work out in a different way." Elizabeth watched the scene with a mix of admiration and concern. The William she saw now was completely different from the formal businessman who had arrived at the orphanage months ago. It was as if a layer of ice had melted, revealing a man with an extraordinary heart. Later, while the children had their snack, Elizabeth found William sitting alone on the garden bench watching the newly planted beds. "A penny for your thoughts," she said, sitting down beside him. "I was thinking about how unpredictable life is," he replied, his gaze lost on the horizon. "A few months ago I thought I had everything under control. Now," he paused, searching for the right words, "now I realize I was just existing, not living." Elizabeth nodded understandingly. "You know, when I first started working here, I was just existing too. I had just gone through a separation, my academic career was stagnant. The orphanage saved me, gave me purpose." "How do you do it?" William asked, turning to face her. "How do you handle so many difficult stories and still maintain that strength, that hope?" "Because every smile, every small achievement is worth it," she replied, her face lighting up. "When I see a child learning to read, taking their first steps, or simply feeling safe enough to show affection, that's bigger than any hardship." The silence that followed was charged with something new, a mutual understanding that went beyond words. William realized he had never met anyone like Elizabeth, someone so authentic in their life's purpose. "Michael and Gabriel asked about you this morning," she commented, breaking the moment. "They wanted to know if you'd come to the community dinner on Friday." "I didn't know about the dinner," he replied, intrigued. "It's a monthly tradition. All the kids help prepare something, and we gather as one big family. Would you like to join?" The word family resonated in William's heart. It was something he had only ever had on paper: absent parents, superficial relationships, a life built around appearances. "I would love to," he replied, feeling a different kind of emotion as he saw the smile that lit up Elizabeth's face. "Can I bring my grandmother? I think she would love to see this place and to meet you all." "Of course," Elizabeth answered, standing up as she heard the bell signaling the end of snack time. "Your grandmother will be very welcome. Now I have to go. We have math class." "Wait," William called, gathering his courage. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? Outside of here, I mean? Just the two of us?" The blush that colored Elizabeth's cheeks was the most beautiful answer he had ever received. The community dinner had been an absolute success. Grandma Eleanor charmed everyone with her stories and her natural sweetness, especially the twins, who stayed glued to her all night. The elderly woman, in turn, watched with teary eyes the interaction between her grandson and the children, particularly when she noticed the identical mannerisms between him and the boys. However, the following Monday, the atmosphere at the orphanage was different. William noticed it as soon as he arrived for his usual visit. The children were playing in the courtyard as always, but there was a tension in the air that he couldn't quite explain. He found Elizabeth in her office, her expression worried as she analyzed some documents. When she saw him, she tried to smile but couldn't completely hide her unease. "Did something happen?" he asked, closing the door softly behind him. Elizabeth took a deep breath before responding. "We had visitors this morning, a couple from Rio de Janeiro, the Whitakers. They're interested in adopting." "Isn't that good news?" asked William, feeling an inexplicable tightness in his chest. "They want to adopt Michael and Gabriel," Elizabeth revealed, her words falling like stones in the quiet room. "And they have a very good profile. He's a university professor in technology. She's a pediatrician. They have resources, stability, a big house." William sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk, feeling as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. Have they already met the boys?" "Not yet," Elizabeth replied, standing up to pour him a glass of water. "But they want to schedule a meeting for this week. William," she hesitated, carefully choosing her words, "you know this is the goal of our work here, right? To find families for our children." "But He stopped, realizing he didn't quite know how to finish that sentence. What was he? The genetic donor, a friend? A frequent visitor who had grown too attached? "I know what you mean." Elizabeth sat down beside him, her voice soft. "But we need to think about what's best for the children. The adoption process is complex, and this couple is already approved, with all their documentation in order." "And I'm not," William finished, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. "I haven't even started an adoption process, have I?" The silence that followed was deafening. Through the window they could hear the laughter of the children in the courtyard, the sound of life moving on as usual while their worlds seemed to crumble. "Uncle William!" Michael's voice broke the tense moment. The boy ran into the room, followed closely by Gabriel. "Look what we made in computer class." The twins carried a printed sheet with what looked like a simple computer program, full of colors and geometric shapes. Gabriel, more observant, immediately sensed that something was wrong. "Are you sad, Uncle William?" he asked, cautiously stepping closer. William forced a smile, pulling both boys close. "No, I'm not sad. Just thinking about some complicated grown-up stuff. Tell me more about this program you made." As the boys excitedly explained their project, Elizabeth watched the scene with a heavy heart. The connection between them was undeniable, going beyond physical resemblance. It was as if somehow they had always been a family, just waiting for the right moment to come together. Later, after the children returned to their activities, William stayed in the room with Elizabeth. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. "When are they coming?" he finally asked. "Thursday," she replied, her professional tone masking her emotions. "William, I need you to understand something. If you're thinking about, well, anything, you need to know it's not simple. The adoption process is rigorous, it takes time, and there are no guarantees." "What if I'm willing to try?" he interrupted, his green eyes fixed on hers. "What if I want to fight for them?" Elizabeth felt her heart race. "Are you sure? It's a huge responsibility, a complete life change. It's not something you decide in the heat of the moment." "Nothing in my life has ever felt as certain as this," he replied, his voice steady. "Since I walked into this orphanage, since I saw them for the first time, something changed in me. I can't explain it, but I know they're part of my life now." "Our life," he corrected, looking meaningfully at her. The blush on Elizabeth's cheeks betrayed the impact of those last words. "William, I can't influence any decision. As the orphanage coordinator, I need to remain impartial." "And as Elizabeth?" he asked, his voice soft. "What do you feel as Elizabeth?" Her response was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. It was time for the children's music lesson, and the reality of the outside world once again invaded the space between them, leaving unanswered questions and raw emotions. The office of Dr. Marianne Johnson, a specialist in family law, was filled with certificates and photographs of happy families. William Thompson observed each one as he waited, wondering if one day his photo with the twins would also be there. "Mr. Thompson," the attorney began, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the documents in front of her, "I need to be very clear about your situation. The adoption process in the United States is rigorous and complex. The fact that there is a biological connection to the children, while interesting, does not guarantee legal preference." William nodded, his determination unwavering. "I understand, doctor, but I am willing to do whatever it takes. The first step is your qualification for adoption. This includes psychosocial evaluations, preparatory courses, home visits, and even after qualification, there is a waiting list that must be respected." "What about the other couple?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "The Whitakers have been qualified for 2 years, the attorney explained. That gives them a considerable advantage. Additionally, they have a profile that the judge may consider more traditional." The word traditional hung heavily in the air. William knew that his life had changed drastically in recent months, but in the eyes of the law, he was still a single businessman trying to adopt 2 children. Leaving the office, he automatically headed to the orphanage. It was Thursday, the day the Whitakers would meet Michael and Gabriel. His heart was heavy, but something inside him refused to give up. Upon arriving, he found Grandma Eleanor already waiting for him at the entrance. His grandmother, always so intuitive, had become a constant presence at the orphanage in recent weeks. "My dear," she hugged him affectionately, "how did it go with the lawyer?" "Complicated, Grandma," he admitted as they walked together through the halls. "But not impossible." "You know," Grandma Eleanor began, her tone filled with wisdom, "when your grandfather met me, he also faced many obstacles. His family didn't approve of our relationship. They thought he deserved someone from a higher social class. But he fought for us, and we built a wonderful life together." William smiled, recalling the stories he had heard about his grandfather. What do you think he would say about all this? He would say that family isn't measured by papers or social conventions, but by the love we share, she replied, her eyes shining. And most of all, he would be proud to see the man you've become. They reached the room where Elizabeth was waiting with the twins. The boys were especially well dressed, wearing new clothes that Grandma Eleanor had brought. When they saw William, their little faces lit up. "Uncle William!" they exclaimed in unison, running to hug him. "Are they here?" he whispered to Elizabeth, who shook her head. "They're running late," she replied, checking her watch. There was something different in her gaze, a mix of worry and something else William couldn't quite place. Gabriel, always more perceptive, held William's hand. "Why is everyone so serious today?" Before anyone could answer, Michael chimed in. "It's because of the couple coming to visit us, right? Aunt Bea said they want to be our family." The silence that followed was heavy. William knelt down to be at eye level with the boys, his heart racing. "Boys," he began, carefully choosing his words, "sometimes life brings us changes we don't expect. The important thing is..." "But we don't want things to change," Gabriel interrupted, his voice trembling slightly. "We want to stay here. With you, with Aunt Elizabeth, with Grandma Eleanor." Elizabeth stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "Gabriel, Michael, remember what we talked about family? About how there are different kinds of love?" "Yes," Michael replied, "but we've already found our family. It's right here," he gestured, pointing to everyone in the room. At that moment, the orphanage secretary hurried in. "Miss Elizabeth, the Whitakers called. They won't be coming. It seems there was a family emergency in New York and they had to cancel the visit." The relief was momentary. Everyone knew it was only a postponement, not a solution. William exchanged a meaningful look with Elizabeth, who seemed equally affected by the situation. "Let's make the most of the rest of the day," Grandma Eleanor suggested, ever practical. "How about we bake that chocolate cake you all love so much?" As the children eagerly followed Grandma Eleanor to the kitchen, William and Elizabeth stayed behind. "This is getting harder and harder," she admitted, her voice low, seeing them suffer like this. "Elizabeth," William stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I know you have to remain impartial as the coordinator, but I need you to know one thing. I'm going to fight for them. With all my strength. And..." He hesitated for a moment. "It would be even more special if I could fight by your side." Her eyes met his, filled with restrained emotion. "William, The sound of laughter coming from the kitchen interrupted the moment. Life went on, and every minute was too precious to be wasted on fears and uncertainties. They had a long road ahead, but for the first time both felt they weren't alone on this journey. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to everyone's lives. William had officially started his adoption process, attending preparatory courses and receiving visits from the social worker. His luxurious apartment was gradually transforming, gaining brighter colors and spaces adapted for children. One Saturday afternoon, while organizing one of the rooms that would belong to the boys, William received an unexpected visit from Elizabeth. She looked different than usual, wearing jeans and a casual blouse, her hair loose and framing her makeup-free face. "Casa, sorry for showing up unannounced," she said, seeming nervous. "I needed to talk to you about something important." William set down the tools he was using to assemble a desk and gestured toward the living room sofa. The apartment was an organized mess with toy boxes and furniture, still to be assembled strategically scattered around. "Did something happen?" he asked, noticing the tension in her expression. "The Whitakers rescheduled the visit," she revealed, getting straight to the point, "for next week. But before they come, I need to tell you something." William sat down beside her, his heart racing. Elizabeth took a deep breath before continuing. "Last night I was reviewing some old documents from the orphanage and found something about the twins' birth mother." She paused, her eyes meeting William's. "She was a brilliant scientist, working in biotechnology research. In fact, she worked at the same clinic where you made your donation." "Did you know her?" asked William, his voice barely concealing his emotion. "Yes," Elizabeth replied softly. "She visited the boys regularly during the first year, always bringing books and educational toys. It was clear how much she loved them, but she was fighting a tough battle against a serious illness. Her last visit," Elizabeth hesitated, her eyes welling up, "was when she made me promise to find a family who could give the boys the love for science and technology that she had." William processed the information in silence, remembering every moment with the twins, how their eyes lit up during coding lessons, how they loved solving math problems. "Why are you telling me this now?" he finally asked. "Because I need you to understand something." Elizabeth stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. "As the orphanage coordinator, I have to be impartial. The Whitakers are a wonderful couple, with perfect conditions for adoption. But as Elizabeth," she paused, gathering courage. "As Elizabeth, I see every day how hard you work to be not just a father, but to honor the legacy their mother left behind." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. It was Grandma Eleanor, bringing Michael and Gabriel for their traditional Saturday game afternoon. The boys burst in like a whirlwind, carrying backpacks full of toys and books. "Uncle William, Aunt Liz," exclaimed Michael, his eyes lighting up at the sight of the two together. "You won't believe it. Grandma Eleanor taught us how to make algorithms with cake recipes." "It's true," Gabriel added, pulling a notebook from his backpack. "We wrote down all the steps just like you taught us in programming. First preheat the oven, then separate the ingredients." Grandma Eleanor watched the scene with a wise smile. "They are truly extraordinary. They spent the whole afternoon turning recipes into flowcharts." Elizabeth couldn't hold back her tears as she looked at the drawings. There it was, right before her eyes, the perfect union between the love for science her biological mother had dreamed of and the loving environment William had created. "Aunt Bea, why are you crying?" Gabriel asked, concerned. "These are tears of happiness, sweetheart," she replied, pulling both of them into a hug. "Sometimes we get emotional when we see something very special happening." "Like when Uncle William gets to be our real dad?" Michael asked innocently, making all the adults hold their breath. William knelt down to be at the boy's eye level. "How did you know that?" "We heard you talking with Grandma Eleanor," Gabriel confessed, "and we also saw the rooms you're fixing up." They're for us, aren't they? Yes, they are, William replied. His voice choked. But you know it's a complicated process. It takes time. We know how to wait, Michael said with wisdom beyond his years. Aunt Bea always says that the most important things in life need time to grow, just like the plants in our garden. Elizabeth, who was watching the scene, felt her heart expand. There, in that messy room of an apartment undergoing transformation, I was witnessing the birth of something precious, a true family built with love, respect, and understanding. The day of the Whitakers' visit dawned with a light rain over Chicago. William had spent the night awake, reviewing documents with his lawyer and preparing for what would be one of the most important moments of his life. His adoption qualification was moving forward at an accelerated pace, thanks to the tireless efforts of Dr. Marianne. At the orphanage, Elizabeth was organizing everything with her usual professionalism, though her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the flowers in the visiting room. The twins were quiet that morning, a rare occurrence for two children who were normally so expressive. "Is everything okay, darlings?" she asked, adjusting Michael's shirt collar. "Aunt Bea," Gabriel held her hand, his green eyes identical to William's, filled with concern. What if this couple doesn't like programming? What if they don't let us keep having lessons with Uncle William? Before Elizabeth could respond, the secretary announced the arrival of the Whitakers. Charles and Marissa entered the room, he with his professorial air and she with the warm smile of a pediatrician. They brought gifts and a genuinely positive energy. "Hello, boys," Marissa greeted sweetly. "We've brought some special gifts for you." Michael and Gabriel thanked them politely, but their eyes kept darting to the door, as if waiting for someone. At that moment, William arrived, accompanied by Grandma Eleanor and Dr. Marianne. "Sorry for the intrusion," said the lawyer, "but we have a situation that needs to be discussed before any decisions are made." Elizabeth led everyone to her office, while one of the caregivers stayed with the twins. The atmosphere was tense, filled with expectations and apprehension. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker," Dr. Marianne began, "it's important that you know some facts. Mr. William Thompson is not just a benefactor of the orphanage. He is, biologically, the father of the twins through a donation made years ago." Charles Whitaker adjusted his glasses, surprised. "This is unexpected, but it doesn't change the fact that we are qualified and—" "Please," interrupted William, his voice firm but gentle, "let me speak." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to the Whitakers. "These are the DNA results and all the documents proving my connection to the boys. But more importantly, there are photos from the past few months showing our time together." Marissa flipped through the photographs with growing interest. There were images of the twins coding with William, cooking with Grandma Eleanor, working in the garden with Elizabeth. In every photo, the smiles were genuine, the gazes connected. "You've already formed a family," she whispered, a tear rolling down her face. "Yes," agreed Grandma Eleanor, her voice heavy with emotion. "And it's not just about blood ties, it's about connection, about understanding and nurturing these children's talents and dreams." Charles observed everything in silence, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he turned to Elizabeth. "As the coordinator, what's your professional opinion on this situation?" Elizabeth took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all her responsibilities. "As the coordinator, I must say that both you and Mr. Thompson are capable of providing a loving home for the children. But," she paused significantly, "as someone who sees these boys every day, I've witnessed an extraordinary transformation. Since William came into their lives, they thrive with him, share interests, dreams." "And you?" asked Marissa suddenly, looking directly at Elizabeth. "What is your role in this family that has formed?" The question caught Elizabeth by surprise. Her gaze met William's, and in that moment all the contained emotions overflowed. She began, but was interrupted by a noise at the door. Michael and Gabriel had escaped from their caregiver and were now standing there, hand in hand, staring at all the adults with a surprising determination for children their age. "Please," said Gabriel, his voice small but firm, "we already have a family. Uncle William is our father, even if it's not official yet. Aunt Elizabeth is—" He looked at Elizabeth affectionately. She's our mother in our hearts, and Grandma Eleanor teaches us amazing things every day. And we promise, added Michael, that if you let us stay with them, we'll study hard, be the best students, and maybe one day we'll be technology teachers, just like Uncle Charles. The silence that followed was broken by the soft sound of Marissa's crying. She stood up, approached the boys, and knelt down to be at their level. You already are the best, she said, smiling through her tears. And you already have the family you deserve. Charles joined his wife, placing a hand on her shoulder. Marissa is right. We came here looking for children to love, but we found a lesson on what it truly means to be a family. So, began William, hardly daring to believe. So, replied Charles with a gentle smile, I think we need to withdraw our adoption request. These children have already found their place in the world. 6 months later, St. Anthony's Orphanage was unrecognizable. The garden, now more vibrant with flowers than ever, had been decorated with lights and blossoms for a special celebration. The children, all dressed in their finest clothes, ran excitedly among the guests, their laughter echoing through the sunny spring afternoon. In what was once Elizabeth's office, now occupied by a new coordinator, Michael and Gabriel were preparing for the big moment. They wore identical blue suits, gifts from Grandma Eleanor, who was helping them with their bow ties. Grandma, Michael called, fixing his hair for the 10th time, do you think things will be different now that it's all going to be official? Grandma Eleanor smiled, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. My dear, the paperwork will only confirm what our hearts have known for a long time, that we are a family. Across the hallway, William was finishing getting ready, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his suit. The past few months had been intense, finalizing the adoption process, moving to a new home near the orphanage, and now, finally, his wedding to Elizabeth. Son, Grandma Eleanor entered the room after getting the twins ready. Elizabeth is asking if you still have that flash drive. William smiled, pulling a small golden device from his pocket. It was the same flash drive the boys had used months ago to save their first computer program. Now it held something even more special, the wedding vows they had written together as a family. In the garden, the guests were settling in. Many were children and staff from the orphanage, along with some close friends and family. The Whitakers were also present, having become dear friends of the family. Charles had even started volunteering to teach programming classes at the orphanage. The ceremony began to the sound of soft music. Michael and Gabriel entered first, carrying the rings and grinning from ear to ear. Next came Elizabeth, stunning in a simple yet elegant dress, holding a bouquet of flowers from the garden she and the boys had cultivated together. When everyone was in place, William connected the flash drive to a small projector. On the orphanage, while a special video began to play, scenes from the past few months, precious moments captured unpretentiously. The twins conducting science experiments in the kitchen with Grandma Eleanor, Elizabeth teaching them how to care for the plants, William helping with homework, all of them assembling furniture in the new house. Family, the officiant began, is not just the one we are given by blood, but the one we choose and that chooses us every day. Today we are here to celebrate not only the union of William and Elizabeth in marriage, but also the officialization of a family built by love. The vows were exchanged amid smiles and tears. Michael and Gabriel actively participated, adding their own promises to the ceremony. I promise to be the best brother in the world, said Michael, his childlike voice filled with sincerity. And I promise to always help with the computer programs, added Gabriel, drawing emotional laughter from the guests. After the exchange of rings, William and Elizabeth turned to the boys, who were eagerly waiting with 2 envelopes in their hands. They were the finalized adoption certificates, which would be officially presented that day. Michael and Gabriel Thompson Johnson, read the officiant, beloved children of William Thompson and Elizabeth Johnson. The applause and celebrations that followed were just the beginning of a new chapter. The party took place right there in the orphanage garden, with cake, music, and plenty of joy. The children danced and played while the adults chatted and shared memories. Later, as the sun began to set, the family gathered on the same garden bench where it had all begun. William and Elizabeth, now married, each holding a twin in their arms, and Grandma Eleanor by their side, smiling contentedly. Dad, called Gabriel, sleepy after such an emotional day. "Remember when you first came here?" "I do, son," replied William, kissing the top of his head. "It was the day my life truly began." "And now?" asked Michael, his green eyes identical to his father's, shining with curiosity. "What happens now?" Elizabeth smiled, adjusting Michael in her lap. "Now, my love, we keep writing our story together. As a family," added Grandma Eleanor, looking proudly at the group. The garden of St. Anthony's Orphanage remained a special place for all of them. It was there that they had found each other, where fate had turned a gesture of generosity from the past into an invaluable gift of love. The flowers that Elizabeth and the children had planted continued to grow, just like the love that bound them together. William looked at his family and smiled, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The emptiness that once consumed him had been filled not with possessions or status, but with the true and unconditional love that only a family can provide. And there, in that blooming garden, under the orange-hued sky of dusk, he finally understood that true wealth lies not in what we own, but in the bonds we build and the love we share.